Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode number 214. The chickens are okay. They're still up at the strip club, and I'm just not even going to get into it. But I do have this.
I just printed off a sheet of paper, and I was going to put a rubber band around it, stick it to the bottle, and say, here you go.
Total guy thing, right?
Yeah. No,
I don't even know if I'd even have printed it out on it. I probably would have wrote it out in pencil and scotch taped it to the bottle.
Yeah. No, she printed, got some packing tape out, and covered the label over, the sheet that I had printed over the bottle, and then got some ribbon and tried to pretty that up, by doing like some sort of a crisscross pattern across the bottle, and it looked really good. I'm going every year. We get invited to a handful of Christmas parties that do these kind of gift exchanges where every person brings a gift, and there's kind of you cast lots basically to see who gets which gift, kind of a thing. And I plan on putting, bringing a couple of bottles of my stuff to each one of those. I'll have, I usually bring a bottle or two to open and drink and share there, and then a couple of bottles that have ribbons on them to add to the gift pile. And it's a great way to get rid of the stuff you don't like. I'm kidding.
That was you, Ryan. 2 or 3 years ago, I believe it was episode 14, and I think it was close to Christmas. I don't remember the exact date, but we were talking about gifting, your meads to people, and different ways that we could do that. So, are you still gifting are you still scotch taping your labels to the or using the rubber band?
Yes, actually, yes, I am. But JD, do you remember the last time that you and I had dinner together, and it was a magnificent Mexican feast, and I gave you a little gift for your mantle?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, so JD's laughing. I should let everybody know the joke. I was working at a company, and they were doing these kind of artistic style headshots because they wanted us to all have photographs on the website. And one of them, it looked really funny, and I went to Walgreens, and I think I printed it out at Walgreens and went and bought a frame from off the shelf there, and I took a pen and I signed it, it looks like one of those funny, dramatic headshots that like an actor would have.
Yep. And
I just signed it. I said, all my best, Ryan. And I gave it to JD as a gag gift the last time we had dinner. I have taken to giving those away as well. I say, here's a bottle of mead and a signed headshot.
That's great. Oh my God, that's great. You know, and this is just one of the things we'll probably wind up talking about it again in the next session. Just a reminder to all of our listeners out there, this is the last show of our 6-week schedule. We'll be off for a couple of weeks after this, and then we'll be back for 6 more. You know, I mean, we'll talk about gifting and all that, but I thought, you know, I was going through some of these episodes and I caught that one and I thought, you know what, I'm going to cut this out and play it tonight. It's kind of funny, you know, talking about labeling your bottles for a gift. So anyway, good stuff. Hey, again, welcome to the Mead House. This is episode number 214. And, you know, you can listen to us on your favorite player anywhere, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeart. I mean, they're just everywhere. I got to whisper this, tell Alexa to play the Mead House. Because she will, because it's also on Amazon Music as well. So, and mine is sitting right here on my desk. So if I say the word, she'll start playing. So, but anyway, a bunch of other places up there on the website, themeadhouse.com. You can find us just everywhere. You can, if you got a player on your desktop or whatever, you can also get the RSS feed right off the website as well and plug that in. And subscribe to the podcast. But hey, in this episode, a few sessions ago, we promised that we're going to do a couple of Mead House, a couple of social club sessions each 6-week period, and tonight's one of those. So we're going to devote the whole night to social club, answering questions from mead makers with no formal expertise other than what we've experienced in our own brew house. And it's a fairly popular program that we run here. We do get emails frequently from listeners out there with some questions. So we're going to do that tonight. But first, thanks to all the Mead House key holders. And I need to pull up my email because I see we had another person who signed up. And let me quickly find that person's names. I always like to mention their names on the air when I get them. Let's see. Travis, I believe it's Travis Calloway, joined Patreon. Thank you, Travis. Glad you're a member here, and welcome to the Mead House. But you too can become a Mead House key holder like Travis and help support the show for as little as $2 a month. We've got some great thank you gifts to send out to you, plus a listing of key holder only content. So get on over to patreon.com or search for the Mead House over there. And, you can also click on the link in the show notes on each and every episode. So with that, what are we drinking tonight? I got my box, Jeff. Did you get your box?
I got my box.
Yeah, I got my box. And first one up, this is the, let me get the bottle. This is, let's see, this is experiment number 2109. This is the coffee cardamom mead. It's a 12%er from Sap House. And when I popped the cork out of it, I mean, just instantly, I got this coffee aroma. Swirl it around, and I'm going to do this live. I like doing it live, Ryan. I'm sorry.
Eat your heart out.
It's definitely coffee. I mean, you stick your nose in the glass. Now I'm drinking it out of a Glencairn glass. It's a nosing glass. I love using these because I can get all kinds of smells and aromas and stuff out of it. But I get a little bit of the cardamom, not so much, but mostly coffee. Mildly sweet up front. And then you get this, I don't know, Jeff. I have mixed feelings on this one. Now, this one was supposed to mimic some sort of an Israeli coffee. I guess that's the cardamom part. I'm not really sure because I've never had Israeli coffee. but you do get coffee when you take a sip. The cardamom does show up in there, but it's got this tartness that I'm finding it difficult to deal with. I'm sure that's coming from the honey. One more time. You let it wash over your tongue, and then there's a very mild sweetness there, but then it goes away quickly, and then I get this kind of a tart thing going on. I get the cardamom on my tongue as well. The coffee kind of lingers and lingers and lingers and lingers all the way to the finish. So I'm not sure how to take this one yet. So we're going to leave that one sit here for a little bit. Maybe as it oxidizes here in the open glass, maybe that'll help it along a little bit. And I'll take a sip a little bit later on. Now, in my other glass, it's bourbon night here at the Mead House Southwest. A little drink of water there. The bourbon I'm drinking tonight is another one that I'm fond of. Now, it's not one of my best lists or anything like that, but this is a very good tasting bourbon that has been around for a very long time. However, when you pick it up, make sure you get this one. This is Old Grandad 114. Okay, there are several Old Granddads out there. Make sure you get the one labeled 114. Now, it's 114 proof. Obviously, that's why the 114. Really good bourbon. I mean, all the characteristics are there. The vanillas, you get the char off of the barrel. You get like a toasted caramel, a little bit of brown sugar on the back end. There's a little bit of sweetness right up front. Really a nice bourbon. Now, this is at 114 proof. If you want, you can add a couple of drops of water if you want to smooth it out a little bit. But for me, it's pretty smooth just by itself. And kind of surprising at 114 proof. I mean, it's kind of up there. So Old Grandad, number 114, and that's what's in my other fist tonight, and I highly recommend it. So, Jeff, what did you put in your cup tonight?
You know, by a strange coincidence, I am also drinking the coffee cardamom from Sap House. I figured with our storied history of coffee-related needs, that was an obvious choice. So I made that choice. I
knew about this one back in June when I visited Ash out there at the meadery and talked to Evan. They took me into the back room, and I couldn't talk about it because it was still kind of in the experimental stage at that point. But Evan filled me in on kind of the nuances and everything about it and how he was dealing with it. So I knew about it then, but I just couldn't talk about it. So, but here it is. So tell me what you think about it.
Well, when I popped the cork on this guy, I got cardamom on the nose hard, and it is redolent of the cardamom. Pardon me. So I really enjoy a Turkish coffee. And I don't know if you've ever shopped for Turkish coffee, like the ground stuff.
No.
They grind it much finer than like regular drip coffee that we're used to getting. It's almost like a
espresso.
It's so fine.
Like an espresso grind?
It may even be finer than that. I mean, it's
okay.
Literally almost powdered. But the idea is you put it in boiling water. There's an entire process that my wife knows because she's the one that actually likes to make it. And I kind of just like, okay, I'll drink it. But you basically, the grounds stay in the coffee and they just settle at the bottom and make like
Is she sitting there
sludge.
next to you?
No.
No. I was going to say, put her on and tell us how to make that. If she wants to. If she doesn't, that's fine.
As far as the process goes, we'll actually get into my wife with drink number 2 here. But as far as the process goes, I know you start with like it looks like a small kind of a teapot kind of a thing, a little handle. And you fill it with water and sugar. And the sugar doesn't get mixed in. It sits at the bottom and kind of caramelizes as that water gets brought up to boiling, and then you add the coffee. And there's some fiddly steps as far as like when you take it off the heat and on the heat, so you get like a little bit of a kind of an almost creamy top, like you do with an espresso when you're making that right. And it's. We enjoy drinking them from time to time. We've even got, we've invested in the little stuff like that. But anyway, what I was meaning to talk about, when you go to buy the Turkish coffee grounds, the cardamom is already added to it.
Oh, okay.
And this reminded me, like the way that they sell these is like no cardamom, regular cardamom, extra cardamom.
Oh, really?
Super duper cardamom. Like, yeah, it's.
Oh, wow.
The cardamom level gets out of hand very quickly. This kind of reminded me of that because the cardamom is really strong, at least on the nose on this one. And
maybe that's what I smell.
Taking a drink of it, I get the coffee kind of on the mid palate as well as a little bit of sweetness up front. It's drier than I expected, and part of that is just like, you go to any Middle Eastern like bakery or something like that, and you get a little baklava on a coffee. The coffee is usually served sweet. I've had to tell people like make it black, and then that way they just put a little sugar in it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just really really sweet, and I expected this to be sweeter than it is. It's almost like an off dry to me. And that cardamom really comes in like almost at the back palate. It gets almost a bitter finish to me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I get that too. Yeah.
So this is not my favorite coffee mead. It's interesting. And I'm personally interested in trying some of the idea of coffee plus cardamom in a mead myself. Mm-hmm. This is not exactly what I was expecting. I'm not displeased with it, but not my favorite coffee mead that I've had from them.
Yeah. Well, it's a good effort. I mean, the one thing that I appreciate about Sap House is they're not afraid to jump in with both feet and get something on the experimental table and start playing with it. And I knew back in June that they were, messing around with coffee and cardamom. We couldn't taste it then. But good effort by Ash and the boys out there at Sap House. I appreciate everything that they put into it. So.
Oh yeah, I'm glad that they're making these experimental batches and trying these flavor combinations. It's great that we're seeing this on the market. Totally.
Yeah, and for those of you that subscribe, and we highly recommend that you subscribe to the Mead Club out there at Sap House. So we don't mention that very often. We should. They depend when they put out these experimental batches in your box. It's wise to give them a little bit of feedback. Okay, email them back and tell them what you think because they depend on feedback from the customers, from the consumers. As to whether to continue or discontinue a particular flavor just based on the feedback. So, those of you out there, if you subscribe, please, give a lot of feedback to Ash and the guys out there at Sap House Meadery and let them know, and be honest about it. Ash really appreciates that more than anything. And if you don't like something, tell them about it. And, they appreciate that kind of feedback. So. Anyway, so what's in your second glass?
Well, in my second glass, I mentioned I was going to talk about my wife with this one. My wife is out of town this week. She's changing jobs. She's got a week off. So she decided to go to Tennessee and visit with her sister. Oh. And that means I'm sleeping alone, which means I'm not sleeping very well. Yeah. Because I'm way too used to being married, apparently.
Yeah.
So my other cup is a nice hot cup of coffee with a big fat slug of Irish cream in it to make one of my favorite fall time drinks. So.
Oh, yeah. Now, so how do you make it?
Well, I take the coffee and I leave around about an inch headspace on the mug, and then just basically fill it up to my heart's content with the Irish cream.
Okay, so you just okay. Here's what you do. All right, get yourself a bottle of Jameson stout. Okay, don't get there's one cold brew and one called stout. Cold brew, I mean, it's decent, it's okay to use, but we found that in this particular recipe that we put together, the stout version of the Jameson works best. So it's one ounce and a half of Jameson stout whiskey, about 3/4 of an ounce of Kahlua, and about 2 ounces of Irish cream, and then pour your favorite coffee, whatever you want, over it, and then a little how do they call it? A little dipple of a whipped cream. What do they call that? A little dab of whipped cream or whatever.
Dollop.
There you go, dollop. Jesus, JD. Oh my God. Dollop of whipped cream on the top and try that. You can add a little bit of cinnamon on top if you want. That's always good too. We drink that here at the house sometimes on a Sunday morning just to get started. So, but anyway, well, that sounds good, Jeff. Good stuff. Ryan, you've always got something pretty interesting. Now, you past couple of nights you've been like single cupping it. So, what's in your cup or cups tonight?
Well, there are two, but I'll get to those in a second here, because as Jeff was talking about, some of the Turkish coffee and that kind of thing, and Andrea, my wife, is Lebanese, and I'm always around these Lebanese people, and in a good way, and it's from what some people, there's Turkish coffee and there's Lebanese coffee and there's Greek coffee, and it's all very, very, very similar. I mean, it's kind of like all of them. There's anise flavored liquor there. The Italians call it sambuca, the Greeks call it ouzo, the Lebanese call it udda, and it's similar. So they all these folks from the Mediterranean bend there all kind of have the same stuff. So Turkish coffee or Greek coffee or Lebanese coffee is pretty much all the same. Yes, there's some nuances. Fine. If your name is like Constantinopolis, you're probably going to say, oh, Greek coffee is different. Fine, it's different, but it's kind of the same. Okay. And it's basically what they do is they take it's a lot like old school meat making, actually. In that they start with ground. It's ultra fine ground. So there's several different grinds of coffee. Ash always says different grinds for different times. Right. Yep. Well, we'll have to ask them about Turkish grind or ultra fine. So whether it's called ultra fine grind or Turkish grind is kind of like a slang name for it. It's way finer than espresso. I mean, it's like fluffy powder, basically. I mean, and kind of like the way your fluffy yeast just won't settle for you. So where can you? Okay, let me stop you there for a minute, Ryan and Jeff. Where can you buy this? I don't believe I've ever seen, unless I just walked right past it. I don't know that I've seen something like that in like Ralph's, or you have to go to like a specialty. If you go to an ethnic food store, you might be able to find some Turkish coffee that's already ground. Yeah. But the best, just like any other kind of coffee, the best thing you want to do is buy whole beans and then grind it yourself. And so you just want to make sure that you grind it to this ultra fine, like powdery, fluffy consistency. I mean, it doesn't matter if you use Sumatra or Kona. or whatever, right? I mean, you're just the bean isn't all that special. I mean, okay, let me stop there. I'm probably gonna get death threats from some Turks or something.
Yeah.
But
nasty emails from some Israeli.
Yeah. Right. So, but what they do is they've got this, and I can never pronounce it right. You guys know I don't pronounce things the right way, but it's called like kev or a keeve or something. It's like a little pot with a side handle on it.
Yeah.
It's a little tiny metal, usually like copper pot with a side handle on it.
Yeah.
And what you do is you take this ultra fine powdery, coffee grind, and you put it in the pot, and you then put water in it, and you put it on the stove, or heat or fire or flame or whatever, campfire, doesn't matter. And here's the part that's kind of like the old time mead making, is you basically bring it almost to a boil, and then it foams up, and then you scrape off the foam.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
How many old mead makers said, "Oh yeah, boil the honey and just scrape off the foam."
Up.
and so you do that, right? And you bring it almost to a boil, you scrape off the foam, and then you do it again, and then you pour it in a cup, and you drink it. And just these little like finger cups, basically. You just have kind of like your fingertips on them.
Yeah.
And it's like a shot. Now, the thing there is you do leave just like a good Belgian beer, like a good bottle conditioned beer. Mm-hmm. You do leave the last finger in the glass because the last finger is pretty sludgy. Right, because there's no filter involved.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask.
There's no filter involved. You're just boiling the grounds in the water, or not boiling. I shouldn't say boiling. You're bringing the grounds in the water to temperature, and then just pouring it in a cup, and it's settled. And because it's so fine. And then,
I was going to ask you what happens to the grind. What happens to the ground?
Yeah, you leave it in the bottom of your cup.
Okay,
yep, you leave it in the right bottom of the cup. Now. It's fine, right? So you got the Turkish coffee, the Lebanese coffee, the Greek coffee, very, very good. They give you a heck of a jolt. I mean, a heck of a jolt if you need it. Now I go just a little bit farther west to my mother's. My mother's family is from Italy, and I prefer my espresso. Yeah. I prefer the espresso or called mocha, the M-O-K, not like mochaccino. Not talking about chocolate here. Talking about the mocha,
right.
Which is like the Bialetti. If you guys have these little stovetop little mini espresso makers, where you're forcing steam, you're forcing pressure. Pressure.
Yeah.
Espresso is technically espresso if you have 10 bars of pressure or more. And like a little stovetop thing usually does less than 10, so it's called a mocha, M-O-K.
Yeah.
But very good. I kind of prefer that. There's
it works. I got one. Yeah.
It's a little cleaner. There's not as much no grinds in it. It just kind of comes through.
Yeah.
But no, very good. Enjoy enjoy the Lebanese coffee, the Greek coffee, the Turkish coffee, but I don't know. Dollars to donuts, I still like a good old espresso if I've got to pick from it. All right. So what am I drinking?
What are you drinking?
Okay. A few months ago, I made 2 batches, and I thought I ruined both of them.
Uh-oh.
I made one batch. That I had one more can. I had one more can that I had not used yet of our good friends over the Belgian guys. Damn it, I'm forgetting their name. The
Brew Firm.
Brew Firm. Thank you, Jeff. The Brew Firm Belgian, brew, and it was their triple. And I doctor these. Hey, go back. We had the founder, the president on the show, and he gave me permission to doctor up his cans.
Yep.
So I doctored it up, and so I did I call it an over hop triple. And what I mean is that the triple is not generally a very hopped.
Not very hoppy.
Beer.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I should have started that I made it into a braggot. So I took, the 3-pound can of triple mix, and then I did 3 pounds of honey, and then I overhopped it. I threw some citrus in there, and doggone it, it was really good. And it's got the character, that the malt character, the malt yeast character of the triple, but it tastes fantastic.
Wow.
A little more hop than you'd usually get, but not bitter. I didn't do bitter. I just did the hop stand. So just a little bit more hop than you'd get there. And then the honey is not really coming through all that much. The honey, I think, also dried it out even a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so it helps that triple character come out. Well, all right. I had this thing sitting in primary far longer than I was kind of like, oh, let me get it this weekend, next weekend.
Yeah.
And then that we go, I guess maybe the next weekend, maybe the next weekend. And it sat there for way too many weekends. And I was worried.
Yeah.
But it turned out pretty darn well.
Wow.
The next one that I did, this one I thought I really screwed to hell, was a simple Ryan Braggot base. So Pilsen DME.
Yeah.
Pilsen DME. I think it's orange blossom honey. And I told you guys this a while back that I had taken some Cointreau and thrown Cointreau in a mason jar with some medium toast French oak and dried orange peel, bitter orange peel.
I'm curious how that turned out.
I was doing it, and I used it in a couple of margaritas. I was like, it's good in margaritas, but I'd rather just pour the Grand Marnier.
Yeah.
And so I had this, and I threw it in a steeping bag, and I tossed it in the Ryan Braggot. So again, the DME, the orange blossom honey, a couple of hops, and then I steeped it in. And this one, because it was a steeping bag, and again, next weekend, maybe the next weekend, or the weekend after, or the 8th weekend after that. I finally bottled it, and I was really, really nervous because it's one thing to leave like a liquid in primary too long,
right? Yeah,
where there's nothing that can happen to it. But it's another thing when you got a steeping bag, you got orange peels, and you got some oak on there, and you're like, oh, did this start to float? Did it start to get bugs on it? What's mold? I don't know what's going on. Didn't see any of that, but still thought, oh man, maybe some off flavors, like the vegetal off flavor is going to come through here because I had it on too long, and that orange peel. I did a tasting last weekend and that was actually the favorite.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
No kidding. It was very tasty. I'm going to call it a happy accident because I was lazy and didn't follow right away.
Yeah.
There you go. Happy little accident. And, doggone it. It went well. I got a couple of bottles earmarked here for each of you if I can get around to packing a box. And they are both very tasty. I'm not going to say they're, gonna win, international gold medals, but well, actually, who knows? Maybe they will. I don't know. They are very, very tasty. Very happy with them, and I'm enjoying them thoroughly.
Great. Wow, that sounds pretty good. Happy accident, Bob Ross. In fact, when I get bored, actually, not even when I get bored. Sometimes I just don't like what's on TV, and I'll. My TV, actually my Roku box is hooked up to my TV so I can go to YouTube and I'll sit and watch these Bob Ross. I mean, it's just it's amazing how quickly he can paint this beautiful landscape. And oh my God, I've often thought of maybe I could do that. So
I read, interesting thing about Bob Ross. I was reading an article, and it's been a while now to kind of forget, but however many paintings he did, right? Like hundreds on the show, hundreds of these paintings, right?
Hundreds of them. Yeah.
They're all sitting in like one office park in I don't know where, some like suburban place.
Yeah, some of them are. Most of the ones, I would say, 95% of the ones that he did on the show were actually given to the PBS stations. And they did, sometimes they would auction them off. But yeah, I think I read the same thing, Ryan, where a lot of his paintings are just sitting in one particular place. There's a documentary on, I can't remember if it was, I might have saw it on Amazon Prime, about him and his son. And these, I wouldn't really call it a scandal, but Bob Ross never really was paid for his paintings. He was paid for the show. And his paintings, of course, now are worth a lot of money if you can get an original from Bob Ross. I don't want to go into all the details, but it's quite it's quite the thing. If you find that documentary, I don't remember what it's called. I mean, kind of stupid to sit here and talk about it and not even remember what of course, I'm old. I got an excuse. I'm old. But anyway, I mean, you'll find it. Just go on. Go ahead.
We got to get this thing back on the rails in a hurry here.
Yeah.
We're talking about Bob Ross and we're the meat house.
Yeah. But anyway, all right, so good stuff. So Social Club, let's get started here. Well, first off, I've got this clip that I'm going to play. Jeff, and we'll talk about it afterwards. You're talking about water here, and I think it was a question. It might have been sent in from somebody. This is way back. I believe this might be from episode 10, if I remember right. We're talking about water, and even Mississippi talked a little bit about water conditioning, that kind of thing, hard water, and how to get get over the chlorine, because some places you have if you come to California, there are certain places here in California, especially Southern California, where the water tastes like bleach. I mean, it's just, it's terrible. It's just nasty tasting water. And it's the chloramine and chlorine and all the crap that they put in it. So here's Jeff talking about water. I thought it was pretty interesting. So stand by.
That was me. I just wanted to interject. I think a couple weeks ago we got an email from, and I forget the gentleman's name. He was talking about different sources of spring water, and he had a question for us regarding water hardness.
Yeah.
I actually did get to do a little research on this, and I checked out one of the two go-to mead brewing books that I recommend. One of them is The Complete Mead Maker by Steve Piotz, who is actually one of the guys that wrote the BJCP standards for mead judging, actually. And he has a little bit to say about that, actually. He considers the harder waters a good source. Generally, they act as a buffer and prevent the pH drop that we've talked about a few times before. In a lot of cases like that. And the only thing he cautions regarding using harder waters is in cases like mine, it's coming from a tap water source or a city municipal water source. A lot of those are flavored, or they're not flavored. They're treated with chlorine they're treated with chlorine or chlorinamine to keep the parasite levels at bay, essentially. And that can.
What about things like fluorides? And I mean, our water out here in California is just, it's got everything in it under the sun.
I don't know much about the fluorides, but he specifically mentions that in the fermentation process, chlorines or chloridamines are capable of combining and making some really nasty off flavors. The suggestion for removing chlorine was actually using a Camden tablet, I believe is it potassium?
Yeah, the Camden tablet removes the chloramine, I believe it is.
Well, actually, the Camden tablet can't always get all the chloramine, but it generally gets the chlorine. I forget exactly what he suggested for removing those as far as a chemical source, but the other easily accessible source that he mentioned for getting rid of both was an activated charcoal filter like a Brita.
Yeah.
So in my case, we have really ridiculously hard tap water in the Kansas City area, just due to all the limestone deposits in the ground below us. And I think from here on out, rather than using generic spring water, I'm going to try some experiments using some of my tap water that's been filtered to remove some of that chloramine, and see if that doesn't give me a better result, or at least a little bit more stable fermentation.
So Jeff, they're talking about using activated charcoal. So, Jeff, were you able to do that at all, or is activated charcoal still a viable alternative to, dropping chemicals and stuff to try to get rid of the chloramines, chlorine, that kind of thing? Because I use spring water for all of my projects. I just go to the store and buy, in the gallon jug. It's like 89 cents a gallon. So this activated charcoal, still a viable alternative?
Yes, with some caveats. Caveat one, you need to service or replace or whatever it is to change out that filter fairly regularly, because the filters lose effectiveness eventually, and you can still get chlorine seepage through there. A lot of the white papers that Brita and other company filter companies will put out, we indicate that you're going to get a lot more other crap through there before you start getting chlorine through there, but it does require maintenance. You got to stay on top of that, and you can get some seepage through there. I've done bench trials on this, and the problem that I ran into is it takes a really ungodly long time to get 5-6 gallons of filtered tap water through one of those things. That was the slowdown for me. Is like I'm not, I could put in a whole house filter. I don't want to. We were in a starter home. We weren't planning on staying there, obviously. Sold it. So I just went back to buying the gallons of spring water from the grocery store because that worked just as well. And
89 cents, right?
Exactly.
A buck. The
worst you have to deal with is the checkout girl giving you a weird eye for buying like 12 to 15 at a time if you're having a busy weekend,
Yeah, and then you're back the next day buying 12 or 15 more. Okay, so how to incorporate, and this is right up Jeff's alley too. Ryan, you might just sit there and sip on your braggots there for a little bit. How to incorporate lavender chamomile tea. I have some locally made lavender chamomile tea that I want to make a session mead with. Any suggestions on how best to incorporate? Should I just brew a gallon of tea and add the honey and the yeast? What about adding it to the mead after or during fermentation, almost like a dry hop? The lavender is fairly subtle compared to the chamomile. So, Jeff, how would you approach that?
Like they said, I would make a gallon batch of tea and put the honey in there and go. Think about it this way. So we know that you get different flavor compounds extracted from that vegetal matter between, like a hot process or a cold process. We know that alcohol will extract different different flavor compounds, things like that, than just straight up water will. If you like the tea and you like the way the tea tastes when you're making it as a tea, that's where I would start, because anything else is going to taste a little different. You can certainly add more in secondary, like a dry hop, if you want to enhance some of those flavors. But I think if you want a mead that represents what you like about that tea when you're having a hot tea in a cup, maybe with a little honey to sweeten it, I think I would start with hot tea.
Yeah. I remember this kind of a little bit of a spin-off on this chamomile tea thing. I remember looking back at, there used to be a ton of recipe. Oh, there still is if you look out there. A lot of mead recipes out there. And one of the things that they use to up the mouthfeel a little bit or introduce a little bit of tannin, which helps the mouthfeel, is using tea bags. Especially like an Earl Grey or a dark tea, English breakfast tea. That's still being used at all, do you think?
I see people playing with that all the time. As far as, I'm not sure if the idea of using it as a tannin addition is really as prevalent, but I'm seeing a lot of people playing with just tea flavored meads, whether they're doing like Earl Grey or something like that, or if they're playing with more odd, interesting teas like rooibos or some of the yerbas and things like that out there. I'm seeing a lot of people playing it with it more as a flavor addition than a tannin addition, but you get a good tannin kick with that too. So I think that it's kind of an automatic little plus in your corner when you're doing that.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy a good Earl Grey tea in the morning on occasion with a little dollop of honey. So, what chemically is happening during aging that causes this? This is probably another Jeff question, since he's our resident scientist. What chemically is happening during aging that causes the shift from rocket fuel to, rocket fuel, fusel heavy mead to mellow out? So you know what he's dealing with here, right?
Oh yeah.
I've dumped a lot of these down the sewer lines, and gotten letters back from the city thanking me for cleaning out the local sewer lines here. Rocket fuel. What about that, Jeff?
So here's the thing. We talk about stabilizing mead a lot. We highly recommend it, because if you're leaving any kind of residual sugar and any kind of yeast, both of which are easy to do, you're setting yourself up for a potential bottle bomb, right?
Yeah.
Just because you kill the yeast by stabilizing it doesn't mean that nothing is happening in that bottle. Mm-hmm. You got to think there are flavor compounds, there's water, there's acids, there's probably residual, sucrose, dextrose, maltose, fructose, any kind of sugar, whatever you put in there in the first place, probably a little bit of that hanging out. There's all these like phenols and kind of byproducts that the yeast threw out in their fermentation process. And those are all, a little bit volatile to be honest. So, things like the acids and some of those other compounds will, break down or change or bond with different compounds as they age. Some of the parts of the mead that are more like ionically charged, they'll lose those charges and kind of start to fall apart. I'm not 100% on every little chemical reaction going on here. But it's a lot of it is these different chemical compounds either degrading or recombining or just kind of handling their processes in different ways that tends to make a better mouthfeel. That's not hard and fast rule. You can obviously get some terrible stuff from aging too. It's just a lot less common. Yeah. Generally, aging is a beneficial thing, which is how we've done it for so long with wine and with other liquors.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Good answer. And the longer they sit, the better they get sometimes. So, if it tastes like rocket fuel to begin with, a lesson I learned, like I said, after dumping many projects down the sink because of it, just be patient with it and let it sit a while. It may change to come out to be a pretty tasty little project. So, looking for a rhodomel recipe. I'm about to start a lavender rose petal rhodomel, Ryan. Anyone have good tips or recipes? I've got 10 pounds of raspberry honey. Looking to do a 3-gallon batch.
Yeah. So rhodomel, being the traditionally made of rose petals, and I know why you're throwing this to me, JD, because we just talked about it a couple of weeks ago. There was an episode, I think it was the second or maybe third time that Steve Fletty was on our show. I don't know that episode number, but if you search Steve Fletty Mead House, you'll find it. And I believe what he said, the best way that he achieved really, really nice rhodomels was to basically dry hop the rose petals.
Yeah.
Now he used dried rose petals, and that's what I would do as well, because I've had Steve Fletty's rhodomel and it is very good, and I would do that. Now, the other thing when you're doing these floral meads is they sound romantic. Doesn't that almost sound romantic, Jeff, to say, oh, I'm drinking a rose petal mead? It does, it sounds romantic, but it can also smell like perfume and taste like perfume.
Yeah.
So I would recommend adding, unless you know that you really like it, unless you know that is your jam, I would consider adding some fruit or something. I don't know if it's technically a fruit or not, but like a rose hip, right? Like you get a rose hip, and it would help that rhodomel, I think, pop. Or you could add some sort of other berry, raspberry or something. Or even if you want to make a rhodomel sizer, I think a rhodomel sizer would be fantastic. So again, dried rose petals, a lot less than you think you're going to need.
Absolutely.
So you don't end up thinking like you're acting like chugging a bottle of Chanel is not appealing. Dry hop them, and then unless you really like the taste of and smell of the rose petals, add some fruit. I think rose hips come to mind immediately, because those are often used in teas. They bring a little bit of citrusy flavor. Or I think if you want to go or completely across the spectrum to making a sizer, like if you made a sizer and then dry hopped your dried rose petals in the sizer, I think would be also really interesting.
Oh yeah.
So lots of things you can do there, but those are at least some of the basic things that I'd consider.
I remember this is a little off topic too. You're talking about using a lot less than what you would think to use as far as a dried rose petal goes. I remember my sister got me because I like my Earl Grey, and I get it from I get it from Mountain Rose Herbs, and it comes bulk. And so my little sister got me this little tea ball thing that unscrews. You put tea in, you screw it back on. Why? I filled it up. The pain in the ass was getting both halves to screw back together again, because I just, I thought, well, okay, I guess you just fill this thing up. And so I packed it in there and put it in my little coffee cup and poured the hot water in there, let it sit for 3 or 4 minutes, and then went to taste it, and it was like, holy crap. That's like a lot of tea. So yeah, then I talked to her, I called her, I said, this tea ball thing isn't working, and my tea tastes like crap. And she said, well, how much tea did you put in there? I said, well, I filled it up. She said, no, just put like a teaspoon, like a half a teaspoon or so. And so that's kind of a funny story. So yeah, use a lot less than what you think you're going to use. Start there and then go forward. Don't start at the top and go backwards, because that ain't going to work. Anyway, moving on here. Trying to determine why 2 recent batches of traditional have a sickly sweet flavor that can be best described as, oh my God, urinal cake. Dude, I'm going to throw this one over to Jeff because I think, you're pretty familiar with this too. Let's see. Batch 1 gallon, half pack, dry pitch D47, 3 pounds of honey. Started out at 11:10, finished at 10:15. A bottle of 615. Batch 2, 1 gallon, half pack, dry pitch 71B, 3 pounds of honey. Started out at 1090, finished right at the bottom at 1. Bottled on 628. So let's go back up to the top. Why the urinal cake? Now, I've heard this mentioned before a long time ago. In fact, I think back when I was producing Got Mead, I think there was some discussion about that we're talking like 6 years ago or more. So what about the urinal cake?
Well, I think the telling part is where he finishes up with his recipes. He says, both fermentations were unremarkable and completed within 2 weeks. Both used staggered LD Carlson DAP for nutrients. You know what the primary nitrogen source in DAP is?
No. Urinal cakes?
Urea.
Urea.
Really?
Yeah, so I think that might have been an over-nutrienting kind of a thing, and just ended up with a little too much of that nitrogen in there.
Okay. Well, I just learned something. Okay, that makes a lot of sense right there. In fact, I think, God, now we're really getting back into the episodes. There may have been a discussion where Mississippi Chris talked about using DAP and how careful you had to be while using it. I don't know what episode it was, but it just, I got this floating around in my head that Mississippi was talking about this at one of the very early episodes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You really don't want to overdo it with any of the nutrients, because even stuff that is light in the nitrogen related stuff, like I don't think it's Y yeast that is more minerally than than organic. If I remember right from what Ricky was telling us ages and ages ago, back when he was first on, you can end up with off flavors really no matter what kind of nitrogen, what kind of nutrient source you're using. DAP, you can get some off flavors from the urea, things like the Y yeast or the fermades. Some of those minerals can give you like an almost metallic flavor. There's a lot of stuff that's going into those that you don't want extra of hanging out in your meat. So, use the math. There are Toastna and a handful of other, formulations that you can find online really easily with a little bit of Google Foo to figure out how much you should be putting in there. Don't overdo it.
Yeah.
Your yeast will go hot and heavy with the fermentation. You'll be more likely to throw off flavors. And if it doesn't use it all up, you get some weird stuff going on. So.
Yeah, now Ryan, he also says that he used a 10-pound jug of Costco Clover honey. And if it's honey I'm thinking of, it's pretty good honey. He says he's read that cheaper honey can sometimes be cut with other sweeteners. Now, we had a discussion, I believe, with a young lady on the show. This, again, is way back. I don't remember what episode it was. But she had talked about honey and where honey comes from, especially when you're talking about imported honeys, that kind of thing. And a lot of this honey that you see in the supermarket, it is cut with sweeteners. So you may not be getting 100% real honey. You might be getting honey that's also got other stuff in it, right? Do you recall that episode?
Yeah, if it's the one I'm thinking about, we were talking about the purity of honey or the counterfeit honeys that flood the market.
Right.
And it might have been we're talking about True Source. So a lot of the honeys are cut with things like corn syrup or sugar or white sugar and things like that. And the true source symbol, is the the torch in the night, for that.
Yeah.
So if you've got that legitimate true source symbol on the bottle of honey, it signifies that this is actual pure honey, unadulterated honey. I think there was if I recall correctly, one of the examples was that, in a lot of these supermarket honeys, there was, basically no pollen detected, to even say that it really was honey. And,
right.
and I think all of the little squeeze honeys that you get, so for example, from a multi-state location fried chicken chain, that people may like putting honey on a little piece of bread they give you.
Yeah.
So that's not even honey. They call it honey, but the scientists can't determine if it actually is honey or is just, flavored corn syrup.
Yeah.
So, you always want to get, again, I'm just going to go back to this and say 2 or 3 points here and then move on. Number one, if you can, buy honey from beekeepers.
Yeah.
Go find beekeepers, buy honey from them. If you can't buy honey from beekeepers, buy honey with the true source logo on it.
Yeah.
And if you're curious if it's counterfeit or not, like if, some guys just sticking that on the logo, contact True Source and just verify that bottle actually it has their blessing to say True Source.
Right.
But do that and do that, and you'll at least be making your mead with honey.
This is kind of a long drawn out question. We've actually got another part to this question, Jeff, that we need to address as well. It says he tried both meads, no jet fuel taste, both have an artificial fruity sweetness to them. Any thought on what might be giving me off flavors? Well, we dealt with the DAP part, but what about this artificial fruity sweetness? Where do you think that's coming from?
Well, he's given us the recipe. What he hasn't told us is what temperature he's fermenting at. And I think that is telling when you're talking about D47, because D47 is one of those that has that it's a little bit picky when it comes to temperatures. But I think 68, it can throw some off flavors or some fusels and things like that. And, again, calling back to Ricky, the mead maker, he talked about at the time how, he's using D47 for all his meads, and his dry traditional, he would often get people to try it and they would go, oh, it's too sweet, even though it's right. That's those fruity esters that are thrown by fermenting D47 at really high temperatures.
Yeah.
So, that when I was trying to mimic his style, I think I was fermenting at an aquarium at like 86 or 87 degrees. Well above like what we would keep at household at. But there may be a touch of that if you're just letting it sit out on a counter in the middle of summer, keeping your house like 74, 76 degrees. I could see that happening.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, are Bochets. This is kind of a long one too here. Are Bochets better made with lighter, delicate? And I'm going to throw this one over to, Ryan, because it wasn't that long ago that we actually talked about this as well. Are Bochets better made with lighter, delicate honey or darker, bold variety? Ryan's got a pretty good rundown on that. We'll get into that here in a minute. The rest of the question, I understand the different recipes and desired outcomes will vary which honey to pick. Well, we kind of know that. And then the bonus point, leave a comment on your opinion of vanilla glycerin Bochet. I'm not quite sure what an Acerchet. Boy, I have no idea. I don't know what he's saying there, Jeff, but let's let Ryan take off with the Bochet with the lighter, darker, delicate honey, darker, whatever kind of honeys. Ryan, I know you've got a pretty good rundown on that.
Well, let's just think about that for a second. You're going to boil the snot out of it.
Yep.
Do you think you should take something light and delicate and boil the snot out of it, or something, you know, a little bolder and not so delicate and boil the snot out of it? You know, you think it's going to matter? So again, we talked earlier about, you know, making Turkish coffee and how you boil it, or near boil it, excuse me, and how the old time mead guys used to they boil and skim their meads. They were blowing off every delicate aromatic, every delicate flavor you could imagine through that process. Same thing, but more happens when you caramelize or bochet your honey. You are destroying the delicate aromatics, you're destroying the delicate flavors, and you're creating something else.
Yeah.
So no, I would not go buy some single source, you know, Zambian honey that was just made from blind bees blessed by a Buddhist monk at some point.
At $300 a pound. Yeah.
Right. And say, oh, this will be great for a bochet. Well, it might be if the honey's not that great. But the point is you can do that. You can go to Kirkland and get the good Kirkland, you know, stuff there.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say on that, and we talked about this, is you can get baker's honey, you know, this or baker's honey, or what does the guy up here call it?
Melter honey.
Melter honey.
Melter honey. The baker's honey, the melter's honey, things like that. I have a Costco business center just 2 miles down the street from me. And it basically competes with like a restaurant warehouse. So it's not the typical warehouse, you know, Costco warehouse where you can buy, you know, short pants and electric toothbrushes.
Yeah.
It's basically, they sell like whole lamb and, you know, 8 packs of ribeyes and stuff like that, you know, ready to go for restaurants. And so they also occasionally will have the 5-gallon, roughly 60-pound buckets of honey, and they're baker honey. You know, you get baker's honey, great stuff to make bochet from.
Yeah,
it's a lot cheaper. You're not worried about delicate aromatics or unique, you know, delicate flavors, things like that, because you're going to boil it or caramelize it or cook it. Now I know that, you know, I'm thinking, you know, Matt Whitey's coming to mind here because, you know, Matt Whitey's kind of does a lot of bochet stuff, and there's a difference between having your honey reach hard crack, you know, and and gently, you know, browning it the way you might just gently brown some butter in a pan.
Yep.
So, you know, yes, there are different ways to do that, and probably, you know, the best bochet probably follow the ash. You know, different grinds, different times, you know, probably the same type of thing, you know, different caramels or different honeys and going from there. But the point is, no, you can use the cheap stuff. Make sure it's real honey, of course, real honey. Yeah. And not real honey like REEL honey.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, but actual honey, and then you know, caramelize it up and make your bochet.
Yeah, I don't think, Jeff, that, you know, I mean, pick a honey, put it in a pot and boil the crap out of it. I mean, you know, do a little experiment at home. Take a couple of different varieties that you think might, you know, might come out differently, and then you know, boil them to the same temperature. And then let them cool down and taste each one. I don't think you're going to be able to tell the difference between, you know, any of them, you know, very much at all. You know,
we actually talked about this an age and a day ago. I think Mississippi was still on the program.
Yeah.
One of us, I forget who, tried bochetting some, like, I want to say it was like a mesquite or something like that, a varietal that's fairly easy to get a hold of. And we were actually like a little bit shocked and surprised when that person reported, oh, there actually is a difference in flavor.
Oh, yeah. Could have been Aaron. I might have been Aaron talking about that.
Might have been. But yeah, no, that was a little bit of a surprise that you can get a flavor difference. But like Ryan said, a lot of these flavor characteristics that come from honey are really delicate aromatics. So, if the honey you're looking at is light and delicate and has a bunch of these little floral notes, I wouldn't expect those to survive. If you have something like an avocado blossom that has that really like malty flavor to it, that could be interesting Bochets. That you might get a very different result than a 5 pound jug of your Costco honey right there. But for most intents and purposes, if I'm making a Bochet, it's going to be Melter honey, it's going to be Baker's honey, or it's going to be that Costco special. Just something I can get a hold of in large quantities for reasonable prices.
Yeah, and the whole process of Bocheting too, we've kind of run that one into the ground too. I mean, from using a crock pot to pressure cookers, we've talked about, even a pot outside over a Bunsen burner or whatever. We've talked about all the different methods. So, folks, I'm just going to tell you, you're just going to have to go back to all the episodes of Mead House and listen and find the ones where we're talking about Bochets. That'll run our listener count up a little bit. Pretty good marketing, huh, Ryan?
Absolutely.
So because I don't want to go any deeper into the Bochets because we have literally talked this thing into the woods about Bochets and all the different ways that you can achieve all the different temperatures and aromas and whatnot. And it's a good listen. I've had a couple of Bochets. One that sticks out was from what was his name, Ryan? Oh God, don't get
Whitey?
old. Yeah, when I was up there at the, I think he had one when I was up there at the first Iron Bee. Good stuff. I mean, really good stuff. So I'm all for Bochets. In fact, I still haven't gotten my ferment going yet. I'm still waiting. Actually, no, my parts did come in. I'm ready to roll. But the honey that I'm considering using, I've got about half a bucket of avocado here, and I was going to throw a little bit into a slow cooker. I'm just looking for right around 200 degrees or so, and that's it. And then put it in with my fermentation at high Krausen. So yeah, I mean, go back, look through the episodes. There's a ton of information about Bochets right here at the Mead House. You might even be able to just go down the search thing down at the bottom of the page and just type in Bochet. You might be surprised what it might come up with. So I want to make a mead flavored with marigold petals. That's new. I know to use the petals from food recipes. Not quite. I'm going to have to look that one up. But I have no idea how much fresh petal to use. Anyone try this? Gonna brew a 1.4 gallon sample batch with 1118 yeast and aim for 12%. Was gonna put flower petals. I like the way this guy says, puts his stuff. Was gonna, Gonna. Put flower petals in the primary, but I could wait for the first rack if it matters. Okay, so I've never heard of using marigold petals in anything.
Yes, you have.
I have?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Sap House did that last year.
Who did that?
Sap House did.
They did?
Yeah, they didn't. They called it the genus or family name. I forget which for the marigolds instead of calling it straight up marigolds. But essentially, yeah, it's a.
Oh yeah.
They used a really similar flower to marigold and made a mead with it. It was nice.
Okay. Like I said, don't get old. You forget a lot of things. Anyway, so marigold petals. Then I mean, we're talking something like the rose petal discussion we had earlier here, or what?
I would say so. I mean, we're talking making a floral mead. Marigolds are not exactly my first choice, but I have to admit the Sap House mead was a really interesting flavored mead. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And, hell, there are marigolds blossoming all over the place here now that it's fall. So, I mean, this is a strike while the iron is hot kind of time. I think, the same rules for roses and lavender apply. Use a judicious hand because it's really easy to add more. It's really hard to take it out. So don't overdo it. You can always do another round of dry hopping or whatever you're doing with the flowers. You can't really pull them out. So I would stick them in secondary, let them hang out for a little while. And if you're using fresh as opposed to dried, then definitely only leave them in there for a few days. You don't want any like weird vegetal flavors coming in once the flavors you want are extracted. Yeah. So don't be afraid to pull and then put in a new batch if you're not getting the flavor you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess if you grow marigolds, you can dry your own, and that's something that I do here at the house. I get fresh herbs from the store and bring them home, put them in my little. I've got this dehydrator deal, and I make my own dried herbs, for my cooking and whatnot. So I suppose you could do the same thing with marigold. Well, even rose petals, right? I mean, does it matter what rose?
Sure. I mean, I would imagine.
What can you do with mums? What can you do with mums? I've got a bunch of those out here, and they've only got a couple of weeks left until they're gone.
I don't know. They edible?
Get on it, right? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, make a tea out of them.
I mean, there's. I think the question is it edible? Probably. There's lots of plants that are edible. There's just no reason to eat them.
Yeah, well, yeah. And that's an interesting concept, and maybe that might be a discussion for a show in the next session. Maybe we can find somebody who knows about edible plants and that kind of thing. I think it'd be kind of interesting to find out what things are out there that we can eat. That we can also pick and dry or whatever and add as a dry hop or whatever for our mead. I mean, that's, we talked to that one guy from, he lives in the mountains up there. Well, actually a couple of people, Tom up in, I think he's Montana, if I'm not, South Dakota rather. And then, I can't remember the other guy's name. We talked to Ryan at the Pine Needle, that brewery way up in the mountains. I think it's Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, Gunnison or somewhere up, but way up high. But he sources his own spruce tips and whatnot. And
the spruce on tap guy.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Jeff. God, I'm glad I got you two young guys on the show. These two got Ryan and Jeff are kind of my dictionary or my encyclopedia or whatever. I forget so much. My God. Anyway, so I think it'd be interesting because I know that there's a lot of edible plants out there that we can eat, but like Ryan says, we don't. But be interesting to find out what's out there that we can actually add into a mead. Maybe we can get what's her name back from Mountain Rose Herbs even. That'd be a pretty interesting discussion as well. Anyway, let's see here. Time wise, I think we got a couple of more here, at least one. I bought 1.5 kilograms of local honey with the idea of making a morat. I'm not sure what that is.
That's a mulberry mead.
Okay, but then found out that the honey is macadamia honey. Oh wow! I then thought, what if I try to make a mead that tastes like nuts with this honey instead? Has anyone done something like this before? Or am I being nuts? Still a beginner. So he's got some some macadamia honey
Ryan, and he wants to make a mead that tastes like nuts. So what I'm thinking of is like pecans are commonly used. I don't know that walnuts are used so much. What are some other nuts that might be used to give him a nutty mead?
I remember early in my experimental days of mead making, and I was, making a batch a week or more, and trying all kinds of weird off the wall stuff. And I'd always think to myself, has anyone ever done anything like this before?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
You are not inventing something that no one else has ever done before.
Yep.
Whether you're talking about
somewhere out
elderflower,
there. Yeah, somewhere out there somebody's
right. Or elderflowers or prunes or macadamia nuts or rose petals or marigold petals or pine needles or juniper berries or whatever. Or apple peels. Yes, whatever you're possibly thinking, someone else has already done. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Here, I want to go back. This is not the Matt Whitey episode, but I should, I'm going to reference Matt Whitey again here.
Sure.
He's made some, he's talking about experimental mead makers. He's probably one of the best.
Yeah.
He's peanut butter and jelly mead he's made before. And, peanut butter meats and things like that. He was telling me that, he's done some experiments with different nuts, like almonds and walnuts and cashews, that kind of thing. And he said they really don't give you that much difference between that and the peanut.
Yeah.
So he's like, you can go spend a ton of money on some fancy nut, but it's not really going to taste any different than a peanut, which is, cheap.
Yeah.
So nut meads are great. I think you can do some of that. You can bring some of that out. And of course, there are two basic ways to do the peanut mead or the nut mead. You can get peanuts and do the southern boil. You ever had southern boiled peanuts?
Yep, a lot of them. Boy, oh yeah, yep. North Carolina. Yeah. Oh yeah, North Carolina. My folks out there in North Carolina, every once in a while they'll do up a big old batch of boiled peanuts. Oh my God, that's good stuff. Oh yeah.
I feel like I'm almost about to diverge us off the rails again, so I'll pull it back. But to listener land out there, to Mead House Nation, get some boiled peanuts or make your own boiled peanuts. They're not all that hard to do.
Nope, they're not.
They'll change your peanut game. So do some boiled. They sound easy, but the sum is greater than the part. So boiled peanut, you can do something like that, right? You can do your peanut mead.
Yeah.
That's fine. Go ahead. It's not going to be different than almond mead necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay. The other way to do it is, of course, our very good friends at Amaretti have every kind of nut extract you can imagine.
Yeah.
From walnut to macadamia nut to pistachio to hazelnut to whatever.
Yeah.
And you can try that as well. You can add some of that in there and see how it goes. But yes, to answer your first question, nut meads exist. People have done them before. And then secondly, is the question of, I would say if you're going to use your own nuts, be very careful and delicate, but peanuts would be the way to go. And if you want to use the flavorings, Amaretti's got a bunch of them.
Jeff, there's, we wrap this one up. So I want to try to get to this next one before we run out of time. But real briefly, I know that there's in fact, I got a jar of it up in my cupboard. It's this powdered peanut butter stuff.
Yeah, PB2.
Yeah, it's good. Like if you make malts at home, malted milk or whatever, I throw a teaspoon of that. Oh, yeah, it's pretty good. You can use that. I've heard of people using that in beers and whatnot.
Oh, yes.
But briefly, there is an issue if you you get a big bag of pecans, okay, and you want a pecan flavored mead. But like Ryan said, it's going to come out just tasting like a nut, any nut. But these folks out there that, they're bent on roasting their own pecans, there is an issue with the oil, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, briefly explain what that's all about.
Well, many nuts, pecans being the one that comes immediately to mind here, have a lot of oil in them because that's just how they form. And in the process of fermentation, especially if you're breaking those guys up and doing stuff like a roast to get them out, that oil can separate from the fiber, the husk, whatever the body of that nut is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. The meat. And well, like any other oil or oily byproduct in an alcoholic beverage, then you're risking that oil becoming rancid and that rancid flavor spreading into the meat.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's problematic. I've heard a lot of people talking about, roast them on paper towels at a low temperature.
Paper bag, yeah, brown paper bags, yeah, right, yeah.
Or boil them and then cool the water and skim the oil off the top, and
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Yeah, bless you.
Bless you.
That's a lot.
Kazoon type.
That's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Thank you. As far as the nut meat goes, man, whether you're using peanuts or pecans or cashews or almonds or what have you, it feels like a lot of effort when amaretti is pour, mix, and taste.
Yeah, a spoonful,
Right.
Yeah, when you can dip it out of a jar and toss it into the fermentator. That's too easy. But I dig it. Yeah, I don't mind a nut flavored. One of Raven's favorite beers, and we can't find one that actually tastes like it, is a pecan. It's a brown beer and made with, and it has this pecan flavor. And we had it out at this hotel over in Riverside that we stayed at for a couple of days. It's like this big Mexican, almost like a resort, really cool place. And the Presidential Bar out there had this beer that was really good, and Raven really liked it. And had a really nice pecan flavor in it. Don't know how they incorporated it in there. Can't find another beer that matches the one that Raven had. And believe me, she's tried them all by this point. But anyway, let's see here. Let's do one more here. Last one. Hi, guys. I've made 2 batches of mead. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah. Hi, guys. I've made 2 batches of mead so far. Been kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Hey, we all do. Not doing hydrometer readings or anything like that. Oh, wow, that kind of flying. Okay. Very, yeah, very bad. Very low-tech experimentation. I would question that without a hydrometer, really. Long story short, my first batch was bottled too early, and I had a geyser when I opened it. Okay, that's, again, I can go back to the hydrometer for that one.
Get a hydrometer.
Get a hydrometer. This caused me to panic, and I flipped the lid, swing tops, on my second batch that had been newly bottled to see if these too were pressurized. They were not, and I promptly shut them and put them back. Could the act of flipping lids have ruined the second batch as well, or am I probably okay since there's only about an inch of headspace? So never mind the geysers. We kind of, that kind of feeds back to not using a hydrometer, but opening a bottle to check and see if you've got a geyser and then resealing it. Is that a good thing to do or no?
Well, so just the opening, checking, and resealing
relatively quickly. There is the possibility of oxidization and things like that going on, because even if you've only got an inch of headspace, you have now disturbed the air content of that headspace. Mm-hmm. You may introduce oxygen, which can oxidize the mead, and it's not going to taste as nice when you bottle it in the first place. So you probably don't have a lot to worry about as far as, like acetobacter and things like that getting in there if it was a real brief check. The thing I will caution about here, though, more than anything, is, hey, I flipped the lid and it wasn't carbonated. It wasn't carbonated yet, because he's talking about this being the second batch and he's checking the first batch. The first batch, I'm assuming, has been sitting for a while. The second batch, probably not as long. So whatever is hanging out, whatever mistakes that he made with that first batch that led to that geyser effect could still be going on, and it's just a ticking time bomb. So yeah, I would stop the low tech stuff. I would spend the $10 to get a hydrometer, and then another $5 for the metabisulfite and sorbate. Figure out when your meats are finished and stabilize them.
There you go. Good deal. All right. I think we're going to drop the hammer right there. We just flat ran out of time. Yeah, I know. All right. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with us here at the Mead House. And, if you want to get on the show, we've already had a couple of listeners so far, and I think we're lining somebody else up, if I'm not mistaken, for the next session. Kyle Descharmes on the show. Laura Scott's been on the show. Avid listeners here at the Mead House. That's real simple. All you got to do is let us know what you're brewing. Send us an email, info@themeadhouse.com, or send a message on Facebook or Twitter, both at the Mead House, and then we'll set up a date, talk to you about your brewing project, and get you on the air. Anyway, with that, remember, we're going to be gone for a couple of weeks, so we'll be on hiatus. That's our normal schedule, 6 and 2. And this is show number 6. So Ryan flipped the lights off. Jeff slammed the door shut. Hey, we'll see you in a couple of weeks for episode number 215 right here at the Mead House. We're gone.